Councillor Bell. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Move on to item 5.2, risk framework update. Mr. Hobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did present where we were at with risk framework this last meeting. We come from a pretty good solid spot. Like anything, it's important to go back and review and revise and assess what we're doing. So we have been looking at our architecture and strategy within the policy we currently have, which is fit for purpose. We're in the process of doing that right now. Again, Julie Christensen's leading that. So Julie's picked up a number of strategic projects to lead like Big Place and so on, and we're getting great value out of it. So we're now really looking at how we continue to develop our procedures around recording and reporting, making sure that our priorities are right, reviewing that register on a regular basis, so as we know things change regularly, so how do we capture those changes and make sure that our documents are as up to date as possibly can be, and we consider more risk. And that's at all levels: governance, operation, environmental, community, etc. And we will be holding risk workshops. Once we get this all aligned, we will be introducing it to all staff and to councillors as well, so everybody's familiar with what that looks like.
And I've asked Mr. Hobbs that once that framework and we've got it all populated and it's up and running and working, and you're comfortable from a governance point of view, it covers the risks that you face as a council and also the internal risks that Mr. Hobbs faces, that it is reported to you 2 or 3 times a year. And when there's a risk profile or a critical area that needs addressing, that will help and change. And I think it's important that you do look at resource your risk, because some of those risks might be to a point where you want to mitigate them further. So that there's a clear direction, especially those ones at the governance level, where you might give to Mr. Hobbs to actually mitigate some of those risks more fully. So I think it's an important process, and the workshop will be important for you to go through, identify, assess the risks, look at the mitigation measures for those risks, feel comfortable with those. You can never get rid of risk. You can only manage or mitigate. So is there the systems and processes in place, and I come back to that again, to mitigate some of the risks? At a political level, have you got a plan in place to mitigate those risks? And that might be even at the top level, governance risks that you may have perceived around the table. So we need to make sure we manage those appropriately. So any questions, Mr. Hobbs, on that? Thank you. I think good progress is being made. I'm very comfortable with that, and as reported to you earlier, Mr. Hobbs and myself will be meeting with your auditor to go through, probably on a positive note, not a negative note. The positive note is, what are the priorities for South Waikato District Council to, what areas to improve best practice? So we're looking at it from a positive way, and an audit goes around and sees a whole lot of things happening in different local authorities, and they get a view of what is kind of best practice. So I always like to think that local government is not competitive, it is actually complementary. We should be working together. We should be actually trying to share best practice amongst us. And one of those key touchstones for me is the auditor, where they get to see all the systems and processes and can actually give us a steer to where we can work with some of the other partners and make progress better. So we'll be doing that on the 2nd of November. So we'll report back to you on that. Are there any members' information requests that you would like on the next agenda of our committee? I've received no questions for this agenda, but is there anything you would like to be put on the agenda next meeting, or you'd like reported next meeting?
I think it relates to risk, the legislation around risk, and a number of recent court cases. I think have made the community much more conscious, and I think new risks that we weren't conscious of have come to the fore. So could we have a...
Certainly, I'd like, as part of the framework of the workshop, I think that's the starting point. Defining and looking at what is risk and the areas of risk. You know, there's governance risk, there's internal risk, the risk of your contractors. Have they got safety plans in place? How do you know that? You've got to manage because you're accountable for a number of things. Well, Mr. Hobbs is anyway. It's him that goes to jail if it goes wrong, and he can't ensure nor mitigate his risk if something seriously goes wrong. So it's about making sure that we manage it the appropriate way. And the first step is to define it, and that will be the first part of the workshop. Your Worship.
I was interested in your comments, particularly about New South Wales and what's going on there, because in our background with us, and I don't know when we start discussing it, but we have on one hand the Minister of Local Government saying, I'm not going to impose large-scale amalgamations on you, but there's going to be change. And the new CID paper that's come on out there that then talks about a lot more drastic change, very similar to New South Wales, and saying at the end there should be a Royal Commission because we have people able to vote like Hawke's Bay, etc. These things, you know, with the motion get thrown out. But it appears that we will follow Australia. And when do we, as a local authority here, start looking at what takes place and the risk as we go forward? And that's just part of this committee, or we as a committee and sort of say, we can work better with Taupo or Matamatiako and put something together rather than wait. Yeah.
I think that there's two parts to your question. One, I think to answer the last question first, I actually think that is on your risk register. That's one of the things that you should seriously look at, is what is the risk of not collaborating with your partners, right? So therefore you will have a mitigation strategy to work with your partners, you'll have a lash, you'll work with Taupo, whatever needs to be done. I think the second part of that is the headlines that appear in the paper all the time. And they're the ones that kind of get the minister's ear. For example, the financial issue that happened at Waikato put local government in bad light. And it was about small units of local government are not financially viable to move forward. I think you have an opportunity to change that. That if you do the best you can from a systems process place, you've got everything in place, you've got a good audit report, everything's up and running, making what you need, and you're servicing your community, because at the end of the day, the community will, I think in New Zealand, will have a big say about amalgamation. So if you're actually servicing and looking at your community, I think that's the second part. Yes, I am told that there is discussion at a national level around reform of local government moving forward. And although there's not any, if I read the Minister's last speech to the local government conference, it was softly until we were elected, and then it might be a bit firmer after that. That's the way I read it.
I think it's quite definite, wasn't it?
Yes.
There was going to be change, what it was going to be. It may not be large-scale amalgamations, but definitely boundary changes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think something else that's interesting that Council need to be aware of. It's starting to occur anyway, so through that preparing the groundwork, I mean, we now have a requirement to consider every contract and service agreement we have with suppliers or whatever to provide services under Section 17A of the Local Government Act, which came in last year. So at the end of the day, we have to say, well, is our water service delivery working the most optimally and efficiently? And that may, we do have to consider things like CCO or private ownership or whatever it might be. And there's definitely a leaning towards CCOs in that legislation, I'd suggest. Mr. Silver might have a different perspective, but of course, as soon as you get to the point where all of a sudden you're farming out your water, say, to a CCO, or your roads to a CCO, at what point does the local government become irrelevant? Because what else are you doing? So there's a lot of things bubbling away that we need to be cognizant of and consider.
And I think the strength of local government is in the community, and how local government services and is respected by the community. And I think that's where the future of local government might be. You mightn't be delivering water on one hand, But I think, as you'll see, if you look back over history, I did a bit of work at one time. The amount of work that's been devolved from central government to local government, we just had a brief discussion about psychoactive substances before. Local government's being pushed more and more into the engagement with the community and providing social outcomes for the community. And I think you're going to see a bit more of that as well. So I think if
They
you're
took
well
the
connected,
well-beings off us.
yeah, if you've been well connected with your community, I think that bodes for a good future.
Councillor Shannon has talked for well-being, and I raised this over the weekend when I was back, in which the story now is the government has said you've got to do those core activities. It didn't say you shouldn't be doing the whole well-beings.
That's a new story, isn't
That's
it?
a new twist on the story. You've got to do these, but we actually didn't say you didn't have to do, you couldn't do those. So then it's up to you as you service your community. If your community wants you to pick up those four well-being, you can do it, we're not going to stop you. So there is a semantics wonderful part before you're going to get rid of general competence and everything else, but it's been a nice little twist because I asked, shall I be chair of the social sector?
Right, exactly.
You know, oh, well, of course you should be, but you said I should only be core activities. Oh, no, we don't. So, nice little semantics.
How to change. Mr. Hobbs, have we any idea when the council workshop would be for the risk management stuff? Have you got in your mind when that would be? I'm trying to create an expectation for council and when they might get together for a workshop.
Well, I would like to think of next audit risk committee, we've got a workshop outside of that. In the next 3 months, I'd expect to be in a position.
Before Christmas?
Before Christmas. We're up to
Right,
November.
maybe slightly after Christmas.
Either December or February. So let's say no later than the end of February, we want to schedule the risk management workshop and get that underway. Okay, well, thank you very much, sir. Councillor Lee.
Sorry, I'm proposing we would get a move recommendation on page 9.
Sorry, I better do that. You're quite correct. Being moved by Councillor Lee. Thank you. Seconded by,
Yes.
hands shoot up all over the place. Anyway, I'll now put those recommendations. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. Thank you. That concludes our order paper. So it's handing back to you,